ladies and gentlemen. My name is William Bairamian. I am the Executive Director of the ANCA Western Region. And today I'm going to be talking with a guest who is familiar to many of you. He has represented thousands of our community members over the past 12 years. And he will be representing more of us in the future. I would like for you to welcome Congressman Adam Schiff. Congressman, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Very nice to have you. As I said, you have represented many of our community members since your election in the year 2000 and have served and represented us in a way that has made our community proud and appreciative of the work that you've done. Now, because of recent developments that take place every 10 years, you're going to be representing more of our community members. So I wanted to see what your thoughts were about that, and if you could talk a little bit about your new district.
I'd be delighted to, and thanks again for having me. It has been a great pleasure and an honor to represent a wonderful district that has such a large and vibrant Armenian community. And I didn't think it was possible in the redistricting to have an even larger Armenian community, but I do, and I'm delighted. I currently have a district, as you know, that includes Burbank, Glendale, Pasadena, and several San Gabriel Valley cities. In the redistricting that was done for the first time by an independent commission, the district was shifted westward. It now goes, it's a north-south district that goes from the forest through La Cañada, La Crescenta, Montrose, Sunland, Tujunga, south through western Pasadena, Glendale, and Burbank, and then further south through Silver Lake, Los Feliz, Hollywood, Echo Park, Atwater Village, and West Hollywood. So we have some tremendous centers of Armenian life, and that's just wonderful. It's couldn't be more thrilled.
Mm-hmm. And you, if I'm not mistaken, had an event in Hollywood in the new part of this district a few months back. You had a town hall to meet some of the folks out there. What were some of the things that you talked about?
Exactly. We had a town hall in the Little Armenia part of the new district, which is very exciting. And it was a mixture of topics, as you might imagine. Some of them were heavily focused on the economy, which is a broad-based concern around the country and our community. What can we do to get people working again, to get jobs growing again in this country? And then there was a lot of interest in very Armenia-specific topics in aid to Armenia, in issues relating to the Armenian genocide, or the difficulties facing folks in Artsakh. So we covered a lot of bases, and but mostly it was really wonderful to get to know a group of my new constituents.
And I want to talk a little bit about some of the issues that you did discuss and some of the issues that are very important to the community in Washington, D.C. But I wanted to ask you before we get to that, what do you think is the most pressing issue in Washington, D.C. right now, not just for the Armenian community, but just for the American public?
I really think it is the economy. It's hit all of us hard, including the Armenian community. In California, we have the third highest unemployment in the nation. We have such a high rate in part in California because our housing industry was so decimated by the nature of this recession. And it's very encouraging to see now new housing starts are at the highest point in 4 years. That is something we need to come back to return to prosperity in California. We need housing and construction to come back. So we're seeing some positive signs, and that's something that we should be encouraged by. But jobs and the economy are the top concerns. Related issues include the deficit and debt. And we're in recess right now until the election. After the election, we go back into session. We have something looming over us called the fiscal cliff, where a lot of these big fiscal issues, what do we do about the expiration of the Bush tax cuts? How much are we going to raise the debt ceiling? What are we going to pay doctors under Medicare? A lot of these big ticket financial issues have to be resolved by the end of the year. So that will continue to be the most pressing issues facing the country.
Mm-hmm. And up until now, what we seem to have seen is a sort of a stagnation in the Congress in resolving some of these issues. If I'm not mistaken, you're a member of the Blue Dog Coalition in Congress, which are a group of more moderate Democrats. What do you think members of Congress need to do after the election, and also, of course, when the new Congress comes in, to resolve these issues so that we're able to move beyond discussing them in Congress and actually implementing them to help the country?
Well, it's a great question, and I think it goes to the root of the challenges that we face. We continue to have the most talented people in the world, the most creative class of entrepreneurs anywhere in the world, the richest natural resources. We've got everything in this country that has always made us great and can continue to make us great for another generation and many generations to come. But at the moment, we have a very broken form of governance where the parties can't get to yes on some very pivotal issues like these fiscal issues that are coming due at the end of the year. We have continued to kick the can down the road, and that's just got to stop. We have to find a way to get beyond it. And unfortunately, there are a lot of dynamics that have grown up over the last several years that accentuate the polarization. The super PAC phenomenon just feeds a situation where anyone who departs from the party orthodoxy has to face a super PAC coming after them. You have the nature of the Fox News and MSNBC, where people tune into the news they want to hear. They tune into what will already reinforce the views they have, and they don't get the cross-fertilization of different ideas. All of these trends are very problematic, I think, for the country. We, both at the very top leadership level and at the level of the sort of field in terms of the members of Congress, we have got to find a way to sit down at a table together to reach agreement, to govern responsibly, and we're not there at the moment, and this is a real problem. I have tried, as you mentioned, in my career to make a practice out of finding common ground. I didn't go to Congress just to throw bombs at the other side. I went there to try to solve problems, and I'm very proud that I have good relationships with members on both sides of the aisle. I'd like to see more of that, frankly. I think part of it for me may be coming out of the background as a former prosecutor, where I'd go into the courtroom, I'd fight it out with the other side, and when the case was over, you go out for beer with the defense counsel, and it wasn't personal, and then you moved on to the next case. It would be good if we had a situation like that in Congress, where you fight over an issue, you reach a resolution on the issue, and you move on. You don't make it personal, you make it professional, and you find a way to govern together.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the fights in Congress. Some of those fights have actually involved Armenian American issues of concern to our community. And you have been heavily involved in some of those fights. And I am sure that you know that our viewers are going to want to know about where we are in the Armenian genocide recognition process. You came to office 12 years ago saying that was going to be a priority, and we thought that we were very close. We knew that we were very close just a couple years ago, and it was stopped. It hasn't moved, unfortunately, to where we want it to be. So I'm sure our viewers are going to want to know where we're at in the process, and whatever light that you can shed on that, I think, would be appreciated.
Yeah. No, and this, as you mentioned, this has been a priority of mine ever since my election to Congress, and indeed even before as a state senator, carrying legislation in this area. One of the bills that I was proud to co-sponsor established a right of victims of the genocide to pursue insurance claims, something that the court, Ninth Circuit, has struck down, and now I'm working on a remedy to the Ninth Circuit decision. We have been very close, and it's been excruciatingly frustrating when we are so close not to get a vote on the House floor. We have now several times gotten a vote in committee, gotten the genocide bill out of committee, barely. We usually have 1 or 2 votes to spare, but we have not been able to take it up on the floor. We have had a very close vote count. We finally got to the point 2 years ago where the community and I and other folks working on this issue were ready to put it up for a vote, even though we didn't know the outcome. And that was a big step, I think, for all of us, because if we take up the resolution and it fails because of all the lobbying and pressure by Turkey, Turkey would spin that as the Congress voting that there was no genocide. And that wouldn't be what the vote was, but that's how they would spin it. So we've been very reluctant to take up the bill without having a good whip count that says we can pass it. The challenging thing is a lot of members simply won't tell you. You can ask them, you can beg them, and until they have to push the button, they're not going to tell you what they will do. But we reached the point where we were willing to take that risk, but we could not persuade the leadership to give us that chance. And so we missed that opportunity, and that is excruciatingly frustrating. It's also greatly frustrating that we have a president who promised to recognize the genocide, who knows the issue very well, and who has reneged on that commitment. Now I continue to lobby the administration and urge them to follow through on what the president said he would do. And I still have hope for this president. He is not someone who likes not to fall through with his commitments. So I continue to press the administration, but it has been a tough battle, and I'm determined to keep fighting it until we succeed. And on that front, I am an optimist. We have history on our side, we have the facts on our side, and increasingly we have actions by Turkey that alienate many of the members of Congress, and those members of Congress are no longer willing to carry Turkey's water on something like genocide denial.
Mm-hmm. Congressman, you touched upon something that I actually wanted to discuss, and that was the community had supported many of the members of Congress who were at that point in a position to bring the resolution to a vote in Congress. And Nancy Pelosi being the Speaker of the House, we were hopeful that that was going to be the case. Now 2 years have elapsed. I mean, we understand that Nancy Pelosi didn't turn out to be who we expected her to be. But this is the first time that there's going to be a presidential election since we came so close. And you being a member of the Democratic Party and us coming, very close to Election Day, what would you say to Armenian American voters, of which there are many, as we approach Election Day, when they're confronted with a Democratic leadership who was unwilling to do something that they had promised to do, and you also have a president who not only reneged on his promise having to do with recognizing the Armenian genocide, but also promises that he made about aid to Armenia, about Artsakh, the status of Artsakh, and also his misguided, and that is quite an understatement, I would say, his misguided support of the Turkey-Armenia protocols. I mean, how can the Armenian American community be expected to look at that president in a positive light?
Well, I mean, it's a very good question, and let me mention a couple things about the legislative leadership and then the presidential campaign. On the legislative level, we have a difference between Democratic leadership and Republican leadership in this respect. Both Leader Pelosi and Whip Hoyer have spoken out frequently, repeatedly, forcefully in support of genocide recognition. They have talked about the facts of the genocide. They don't have any question about the genocide. On the Republican side of the aisle, I don't believe Speaker Boehner ever has addressed the issue, has ever expressed, at least to my knowledge, whether he acknowledges the facts of the genocide or not. I don't think the Republican leadership has said anything on the subject that I know of. At the same time, we haven't had a vote under the Democratic leadership or the Republican leadership, and so I think the community will have to evaluate that. And likewise, we have a president who committed to recognize the genocide but didn't. And I can't, I think, tell the community how it ought to prioritize that. There are many issues that are important to the community, and they will have to evaluate that in the context of all the other issues. I know the ANC has made the decision not to endorse either, not to endorse the president for lack of forward progress on genocide recognition, for diminishing or trying to diminish aid to Armenia and other struggles we've had. And by the same token, Governor Romney, when he had a chance to lead in Massachusetts with a very large Armenian constituency, really showed no interest in the community or the issues important to the community. So it may be that the community will have to look to other issues to decide But I can't tell you that we are making progress. And this session, we have seen the passage in the House of Legislation that calls upon Turkey to observe the rights of religious minorities, to restore properties to the Armenian Church and other churches that were confiscated. That had broad bipartisan support in the House. We decided this session, because it's been so difficult to move the genocide resolution, that we should not put all of our eggs in one basket, that we should try a dual-track approach with the genocide resolution, which I reintroduced, but also with the church's resolution, which I co-sponsored. And so we have made progress. And in Congress, we've also made progress on a number of other issues of importance. We have successfully increased assistance in the House legislation to Nagorno-Karabakh. For years, we've had a problem where the Congress would authorize a certain amount of money for Artsakh, and the State Department wouldn't spend it. So this year, we authorized twice as much, $5 million, and said that's a minimum, not a maximum. And that's progress.
They still need to spend it, though.
They still need to spend it. They still need to spend it, and we still need to finish the budget process.
Right.
But we've never had language that strong in the House before. And similarly, following up on a meeting that I had with the President of the Republic of Georgia, where I raised with him the issue of the Armenian communities in Georgia, which are not getting sufficient resources, which are among the most impoverished in Georgia, that more attention should be given, that we'd like to see more of our assistance to Georgia focused on those areas. He was amenable, and we have now put that in language in the State and Foreign Operations Bill as well. So, certainly frustrations on the seminal issue of the genocide, but forward progress on the church's resolution, on aid to Karabakh, and on assistance in Georgia, and some other key issues as well.
I actually wanted to ask you about that. You mentioned not putting all of our eggs in one basket, which is a good plan, I would say. And you mentioned aid to Georgia. And how a lot of the aid that has gone to Georgia over the past many years has not served all of the populations equally. That includes the Armenian population, but it includes a lot of other populations within Georgia as well. The region specifically that we're talking about, of course, is Javakh, which is a historically Armenian region, which is now in the Republic of Georgia. The funds that usually would be divvied up among these many communities come from the Millennium Challenge Fund, if I'm not mistaken. Georgia has been able to continue its receipt of Millennium Challenge funds, while Armenia has not. As in, the United States government has stopped giving Millennium Challenge funds to Armenia. Now, how is it that Georgia, knowing what we do about them not essentially sharing the wealth that they're receiving from the United States, how is it that they were able to maintain those Millennium Challenge funds, whereas Armenia was not?
Well, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, and we've had many meetings and discussions with them on the issue of the compact with Armenia, they have a set number of criteria that are fairly specific that countries need to meet in order to get within the aid program and maintain in order to stay in it. And one of the real cardinal areas is the level of corruption, the establishment of the rule of law. Georgia has made significant progress in attacking problems of corruption. And while you're absolutely right, they need to make a lot more progress in terms of fair and adequate distribution of resources within Georgia. That, unfortunately, is not part of the criteria for MCC. MCC will design a program. In Armenia, it was about getting crops to market. It was a lot of road and infrastructure improvements. In Georgia, it might be something else. And unless it's written into the criteria of the project that the MCC funds, then it doesn't require that it be invested in equally among different areas in that country.
I see.
Armenia has had some challenges on the rule of law and corruption front. And in some areas, there were initial efforts to crack down on minority opinion within Armenia, to restrict freedom of the press, and those things were of great concern to the MCC. I think they're of great concern to the diaspora. We need to work as a good friend of Armenia to try to strengthen the rule of law there. I talked to a lot of business people here in our community who invest in Armenia or want to invest in Armenia, but share the concern about whether that investment will be maintained, whether there's adequate rule of law, and that's something that we need to continue to work with Armenia to make progress on.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to turn our focus for just a moment to another large Armenian community that is probably not as well known, maybe in the Congress, but the Syrian Armenian community. As you know, numbers in the tens of thousands, possibly the hundreds of thousands, and it has been severely affected by what has been going on in Syria over the past year, to the point where the Armenian community is on the verge of destruction because they've been caught in the crossfire between the Syrian rebels and the army of Assad. And we know that aid is sent to Syria from the United States to help in the relief efforts. Now, is there something that the United States can do in order to ensure, again, that the aid is not going to sort of a gatekeeper and they're the ones who are deciding where it's going, but in a way where the aid is sent and it's helping all of the communities within that country, because Syria is a very diverse country after all. Is there a way of ensuring that aid is diverse, the distribution of that aid is diversified?
Well, my guess at this point is that any kind of economic assistance that we have that's going to the region is probably not going inside Syria, that it's going to support the refugee camps in Jordan and in Turkey and elsewhere to look after and help provide food, shelter for the refugees from Syria. And probably the focus to whatever assistance we're giving within Syria right now is more in the nature of trying to support legitimate opposition in an effort to hasten the end of this conflict and the end of the Assad regime. There is an acute concern in the Armenian community, for good reason, about the Christian community and the Armenian community in Syria. And not a day or a week goes by in our office where we aren't contacted by families in our district that have loved ones in Syria that are desperately concerned for their safety and want to try to obtain a visa so they can leave the country. We are working with those families every way we can, and I'm looking right now at whether we can urge the administration to provide asylum for those that have petitions pending. There are many families in our region that have family members in Syria where they have long-standing applications for visas for those family members, and they have already passed the security clearances, so it's not a security issue. But there is a long wait time and a backlog, and that it may be frustrating under good times, but in a civil war situation, it is life or death. And we have had humanitarian paroles in similar circumstances, such as when we had the disaster in Haiti. And I would like to explore whether we can do that in the case of Syria, so that we can allow these folks that have already passed all the clearances to get the visas necessary to come here. And that, I think, would provide some immediate relief. But it is just a horrendous situation right now. Probably 20 or 30,000 people have been killed. Assad shows no signs of going on his own 2 feet. He seems to have taken the position he'll be carried out. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of extremist groups now entering the fight, both within Syria and extremists coming from outside of Syria, hijacking, in a sense, the revolution against Assad, turning it from something that was a desire for representative government, better economic opportunity, less corruption, into a jihadist kind of an effort, and that's of enormous concern.
Of enormous concern, I think, to everybody in the United States and also to the Armenian community within the United States and throughout the world. Talking about conflict, I want to revisit something that you alluded to earlier, and that is Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh. Recently, I think it was yesterday, you wrote an opinion piece which was published in the Asbarez Armenian Daily. And in that piece, you said, the people of Artsakh, overwhelmingly Armenian and overwhelmingly Christian, cannot be allowed to fall into the hands of Aliyev. By celebrating a murderer, he and his country have shown the world their true nature and made a compelling case for hastening full recognition of independent Artsakh. Is this a call for an independent Artsakh?
For me, it has always been a call for the right of the people of Artsakh to determine their future, to have the right of self-determination. And if independence is what the people of Artsakh want, they should have independence. And I think that what Aliyev has done in making a hero out of an axe murderer is one of the most appalling things I've ever seen any government do. It is such a horrible miscarriage of justice. And for anyone that would have had any confidence in a Minsk process or any other process, to see that one of the players is willing to celebrate a killer in such a egregious fashion, how could anyone have any confidence in that government or that process? It is completely delegitimized Aliyev, his government. Not that they had much legitimacy to begin with, but any respecting, rule of law abiding nation has to look at that and just be sickened. And I think of what the parents of that soldier who was murdered must think about this. And for those who have had a concern with, what would happen if the Azeri government ever had control again over this area, you have to think it would be a bloodbath, judging from this guy's conduct, the fact that Aliyev gives him back pay, promotes him. This is
apartment. You gave him an apartment.
An apartment. I mean, this is someone who, in cold blood, while the man was sleeping, took an axe to him. Smoked a cigarette, took an axe to him, went back to his cigarette. I mean, this is a cold-blooded killer. And it takes a lot to shock me these days, but that really did. And why on earth we would give 1 red cent to Azerbaijan, I cannot imagine. And in particular, to give them foreign military assistance. Mm-hmm. This is a petroleum-rich country that doesn't need any of our resources. They're making money hand over fist, especially with oil prices the way they are. But if what we're giving them is military training, and one of their military people commits a murder like this and they celebrate it, well, obviously the training isn't working. If we're trying to help them create a more professional ethic among their military, and their commander-in-chief is making a hero out of an axe murderer who was participating in a NATO Partnership for Peace exercise, then there's no justification to give them a nickel.
There's no justification to give them a nickel, and it's hard, as you said, to sort of, first of all, it's very hard to swallow, hearing something like this actually happened, then the subsequent actions by both the Hungarian government and the Azerbaijani government, and also any expectation, of course, that Armenians could ever live under the rule of the Azeri people. I mean, it's just incomprehensible at this point, and I think you agree with that. You make that very clear in the opinion piece that you wrote, and I would recommend that everybody go ahead and read that, because it's really a poignant piece that gets to the heart of the issue in Artsakh. Before we run out of time, I had a question to ask you, because it's just of interest to me. 12 years ago, when you came to office, before you came to office, you were in one of the most contentious congressional races.
I think I know where this is going.
You were, and it had national coverage. Everybody was following it. One of the most expensive, if not the most expensive, if I'm not mistaken. And this time around, 12 years later, you're a well-respected congressman who has served his constituency for 12 years now, and you're looking over to the valley, and you see 2 fellow Democrats locked in what is the most watched congressional race in the United States. 2 people who, with whom you served, I think, on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and I'm sure in many other capacities, 2 friends of the Armenian American community, as you very well know. What do you make of the race between Congressman Howard Berman and Congressman Brad Sherman?
Well, you're absolutely right. I used to joke about my own race and saying that, yes, we had the record for the most expensive race for the House ever, and that was fine. I just didn't want to be the one to break that record. And luckily for me, it's not me breaking the record. It's Howard and Brad breaking the record. Not so lucky for them. This is an awful situation because you have two good members who've been friends in the Armenian community fighting it out amongst each other. I have to say, and we start from the disclosure that I'm supporting Howard, that Howard, as the former chair of Foreign Affairs, as the ranking Democrat on Foreign Affairs, is in a position, has been in the past, is now, to really advance a lot of the issues we care about on the genocide, on Nagorno-Karabakh, on Georgia. He has the experience, the contacts, the legislative expertise. That would be very hard to replace, and that's one of the reasons why I'm supporting Howard. But I hate to see two friends going at it that way, and it's painful, it's expensive, but Howard is one of the most thoughtful, substantive, effective legislators that I've ever worked with, and kind of a mentor to me, and that's where my loyalties lie.
Very good, thank you very much. We're about to wrap up, so if there is anything else that you like to say to the viewership, please go ahead.
Yes, I just want to tell you what a pleasure it's been to represent the community, and how thrilled I am that in the new district I even have more of the community. From my very first days in elective office, the Armenian community made me a member of the family, and I want to tell you too, because this happens to me quite frequently when I'm at a restaurant or a grocery store, that someone from the Armenian community will come up to me and say, Congressman, I really don't want to bother you, but I just want to tell you I appreciate what you're doing. It never bothers me. So if you see me on the street or in a store, do come up and say hello, please. I enjoy it, I welcome it, and look forward to meeting you in person.
Congressman, thank you very much for being here. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been watching an interview with Congressman Adam Schiff. My name is William Bairamian with the ANCA Western Region. Don't forget to vote on November 6th. And if you haven't registered to vote, you've only got a couple days left, highvotes.org, and make sure...
Yes, and can I just add to that? High Votes is a phenomenal program. And go online, register, contribute to High Votes. It's a great effort, and it's part of increasing political influence in the community, and a part of civic responsibility.
Thank you very much, Congressman. Thank you very much to our viewers, and have a great night.